I was never much of a party person, especially after a long day at work. But that evening, Michael, my husband, seemed to have conspired with the universe to drag me out of the house. I couldn't understand why he was so insistent though. If I'm honest, the reason was obvious. Adam, his best friend, was hosting a birthday party at a new trendy club in downtown Los Angeles. Michael approached me with a radiant smile while I lay on the couch, trying to recover from a grueling day at the office. His eyes sparkled with anticipation, and he held 2 tickets to the party, as if they were invitations to some luxurious paradise reserved for the elite. "Jess, please," he said, handing me one of the tickets as if trying to sell the most desirable thing in the world. "Adam will be thrilled to see you. And we could use a break from the routine." I looked at him and tried to hide the fatigue weighing on my shoulders. Working in sales was exhausting, and all I longed for was peace and quiet. But seeing Michael's burning enthusiasm, I couldn't bring myself to say no. He wanted me there and I couldn't ignore that. "All right," I conceded with a heavy sigh. "But promise we won't stay too late." He winked and hugged me as if I had already done something incredible. We quickly got ready and I put on my favorite dark blue dress, the one that always highlighted my figure, but was modest enough not to attract undue attention. Michael looked impeccable. A crisp shirt and dark jeans that fit him perfectly. We looked like a couple ready to conquer the world. But in reality, I was just trying to muster the energy to get through the evening. When we arrived at the club, the neon sign blazed across the street, inviting crowds inside. Music was audible even from the parking lot, and the air was filled with a sense of freedom and relaxation. As we stepped inside, I immediately felt the pulsating rhythm setting the tone for the whole atmosphere. Everything around seemed unreal. Bright lights, loud conversations, and laughter intertwined with bass sounds reverberating through the walls. Adam noticed us right away and came up to Michael, giving him a hearty hug. He was the quintessential party host. Confident, sociable, and at the center of attention. I couldn't help but notice how he scrutinized me from head to toe, before smiling and nodding slightly in greeting. His gaze lingered on me a bit longer than I would have liked, but I chalked it up to wine and general revelry. We exchanged a few words and he moved on to greet other guests. I took a glass of champagne and looked around. People were dancing, laughing, and enjoying the moment. It seemed like everyone had shed their everyday masks and allowed themselves to be real, even if just for one night. But I still wanted to sit in a quiet corner and observe from the sidelines. Michael was chatting with friends, and I felt like I was alone with my thoughts. At that moment, I decided that maybe this party was an opportunity to break free from the routine, if only for a couple of hours. And though the fatigue still weighed on me, there was something alluring in the noise and lights that kept me from leaving. I took another sip of champagne and joined the conversation, trying to soak up the atmosphere. Little did I know that this evening would mark the beginning of something that would change me forever. The feeling of celebration was increasingly enveloping me as the club gradually filled with new guests. I stood to the side, observing the dancing couples. When Adam approached us, his smile was genuinely disarming, and it seemed like everything around him paused when he started to speak. He looked relaxed and confident, telling Michael something while I tried not to focus too much on how his eyes occasionally lingered on me a little longer than usual. "You look especially lovely tonight," he said suddenly, addressing me with a warm smile. I blushed slightly at his compliment and responded with a restrained smile, trying to focus on the champagne glass in my hand. "Thank you, Adam," I replied briefly, trying to hide my embarrassment. Michael, busy chatting with other friends, didn't notice the moment. but I felt a slight tension spreading through me. Adam clearly wasn't planning to back off and, looking me straight in the eye, suggested, "How about we shake things up a bit? Let's go dance." I looked at him, then at Michael, who was engrossed in a discussion about a football match with one of his colleagues. I felt a twinge of anxiety, but part of me was tempted. There was something in the offer that piqued my curiosity and desire to momentarily escape my own thoughts. "I'm not sure it's a good idea," I muttered, trying to find an excuse to refuse. But Adam kept looking at me with confidence, as if everything was under his control. "Just one dance. Jess. Don't you want to have a little fun?" His words sounded like a challenge, and I suddenly felt my heart beat a little faster. I gave in. We moved to the dance floor, where the music was so loud that words were lost in the rhythm, leaving only movements and glances. Adam was close. Too close. But I allowed myself to relax a little. We started dancing, and for a moment I felt a wave of adrenaline wash over me. I hadn't allowed myself such moments for a long time, where you could simply forget everything and enjoy the moment. The dance was filled with light touches and sudden glances that spoke more than I wished. His hands gently touched my waist, and I felt the internal tension shift to something else. Something more elusive but thrilling. At some point, I found myself enjoying the dance much more than I expected. It was inexcusable, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. "You like it, don't you?" Adam asked quietly, leaning close to my ear to be heard over the loud music. I didn't answer immediately. My thoughts were tangled in a whirlwind of emotions. There was something forbidden in his words that drew me to him more and more. I saw his eyes studying me, examining every detail, every movement. "It's just a dance," I said, trying to convince myself more than him. We continued moving to the music, while the space around seemed to narrow down to one single moment where only the two of us existed. I couldn't understand what exactly was pulling me toward him, but something within me wanted to experience this feeling to the end, despite all rational arguments against it. The dance ended, and I stepped back, trying to regain control of my emotions. I felt a slight dizziness and a strange excitement. We returned to the table where Michael was still chatting, unaware of the thoughts racing through my mind. I glanced at Adam and briefly met his gaze. In his eyes, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a game in which I didn't yet understand all the rules, but was already ready to play on. After our dance, I returned to the table, but I couldn't find a place for myself. It felt as though an invisible bond kept me near Adam, even though I knew how wrong it was. Michael was nearby, engrossed in conversations and jokes with friends, completely unaware that his best friend and wife had just shared one of the most thrilling moments of the evening together. Adam sat across from me, and between us settled a tense silence that seemed louder than the club's music. He looked at me with a mix of audacity and some forbidden desire. It was as if he wanted to say something important, but was holding back, testing how far I would let him go. "Have you ever thought that things could be different?" he suddenly asked, not looking away. His voice was soft, but there was a persistence in the tone that made me think. "What do you mean?" I tried to stay calm, but the tension was growing. The question was strange and too personal to be a mere joke. Sometimes it seems like life is too well ordered, and it starts to feel boring. "Don't you think?" He smiled, but there was nothing light or cheerful in his smile. It was the smile of someone used to getting what they want. I felt my defenses start to crumble under the pressure of his words. He had a way of finding the right moments to get closer, and it was both frightening and alluring. I knew I shouldn't play this game, but I wanted to understand how far I was willing to go. Maybe it's not life that's boring, but us? I immediately regretted those words as they sounded like an invitation to something more. Adam leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was so unexpected and gentle that I held my breath. "I think you understand me better than you want to admit," he said, his voice almost a whisper. For a moment, it felt like the world around us disappeared, leaving just the two of us in this club full of people, music, and lights. There was a sense that we were alone against the world, and it gave a strange feeling of freedom. I wanted to respond, but I didn't know what to say. All words seemed superfluous. "You're beautiful, Jess," he added, looking straight into my eyes. And I felt a small flame ignite in my chest that I couldn't extinguish. "Adam, don't." I tried to pull away, but I couldn't. So much had accumulated inside me. Fatigue. Unspoken words. A desire to feel alive. Not just as a wife and employee, but as a woman who was noticed. "Why not?" His question was simple, but carried a weight that was hard to ignore. "What's stopping you?" I knew I should end this conversation and walk away. I knew that what was happening was dangerous, but the allure of something new and exciting was too strong. I wanted to be swept away by the moment, to let go of all responsibilities and fears, even if just for tonight. My heart raced, and I could barely think clearly. I took a deep breath and looked around, trying to ground myself in reality. Michael was still absorbed in his conversations, and Adam's eyes remained locked on mine. "It's just that this is wrong," I finally said, though my voice lacked conviction. "We shouldn't." Adam's gaze softened slightly. He didn't push any further but remained close. Almost too close, leaving me with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. As the night progressed, the lines between right and wrong blurred. The conversation ended, but the connection lingered, leaving me with a sense of anticipation and uncertainty. What had begun as a simple dance was now a complex web of emotions and choices that I wasn't sure how to navigate. The music continued to thump and the crowd around us seemed to ebb and flow with the rhythm of the night. I tried to focus on the conversations and festivities, but Adam's presence was like a magnet pulling my attention away from everything else. His gaze was intense and the moments we shared earlier were replaying in my mind. I glanced over at Michael, who was still engaged in his discussions, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents of the evening. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing that I was on the verge of crossing lines that I had once considered non-negotiable. As the night wore on, Adam and I exchanged brief glances and small talk, each interaction tinged with an electric undercurrent. I was torn between the desire to enjoy the evening and the growing realization that I was stepping into dangerous territory. At one point, Adam leaned in closer, his voice barely audible over the music. "Are you okay, Jess? You seem distant." I wanted to answer honestly, to express the confusion and turmoil inside me, but the words seemed trapped. Instead, I forced a smile and replied, "I'm fine, Adam. Just a bit tired." He didn't press further, but his eyes conveyed a mixture of understanding and disappointment. I could see that he was waiting for something more. Perhaps an admission or a sign that I was willing to let go of my reservations. The night was drawing to a close, and the atmosphere in the club began to change. The energy was winding down, and people were starting to gather their belongings and prepare to leave. I felt a strange mixture of relief and regret. The evening had been both exhilarating and unsettling, and I wasn't sure how to process it all. As we prepared to head out, Michael and I said our goodbyes to Adam and the other guests. The drive home was quiet, and the weight of the evening hung heavily between us. Michael chatted about the night's highlights, but I struggled to respond with genuine enthusiasm. When we finally arrived home, I felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I knew that the night had changed something inside me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. I wanted to bury the feelings and return to my routine. But a part of me was unwilling to let go of the excitement and the connection I had experienced with Adam Michael. Unaware of the internal struggle I was facing, kissed me goodnight and headed to bed. I stood alone in the living room, the echoes of the night's events still fresh in my mind. The dance, the conversations, the unspoken truths. It all swirled around me, leaving me to grapple with the realization that the evening had left an indelible mark on my heart. As I lay in bed, I couldn't escape the thoughts of Adam and the allure of the unknown. The excitement and the guilt waged a silent war within me. And I knew that I had to confront these feelings and make sense of what had transpired. The night had been more than just a party. It had been a glimpse into a world that was both thrilling and terrifying. And as I closed my eyes, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held and how I would navigate the complexities of the emotions that had been stirred within me. The morning light crept through the curtains, casting soft rays across the room. I woke up feeling disoriented and heavy-hearted, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy of the previous night. As I lay in bed, I replayed every moment of the evening in my mind, trying to piece together the fragments of my emotions. Michael was still asleep, his steady breathing a reminder of the stability and love he had always provided. I carefully slid out of bed and went to the kitchen, hoping that a cup of coffee would clear the fog from my mind. The quiet of the house was a stark contrast to the lively chaos of the club. As the coffee brewed, I sat at the kitchen table, my thoughts turning to Adam. The connection we had shared was undeniable, but it also felt like a betrayal. I knew that I needed to process what had happened and decide how to handle the situation moving forward. Michael joined me in the kitchen a short while later, looking refreshed and cheerful. He greeted me with a warm smile, but I could sense a hint of concern in his eyes. "Good morning, Jess," he said, his voice full of affection. "Did you sleep well?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Morning. I'm a bit tired, but I'm okay." "I'm okay." He didn't press further, and we chatted about mundane things, plans for the day, household chores, and upcoming events. The normalcy of our conversation was a comfort, but it also made me feel more isolated in my turmoil. After breakfast, Michael left for work, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I decided to call a friend, someone who knew me well and could offer a fresh perspective. I needed to talk through my feelings and figure out how to address the situation with Adam. As I spoke with my friend, I described the events of the evening and the confusing emotions that followed. She listened attentively, offering support and insight. Her advice was both practical and empathetic, reminding me of the importance of communication and honesty in my relationships. "You need to talk to Michael about this," she said gently. "It's important to address these feelings and be honest with yourself and him. Bottling things up won't help you move forward." Her words resonated with me, and I realized that she was right. I needed to confront my emotions and have an honest conversation with Michael. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary for the sake of our relationship and my own peace of mind. By the time Michael returned home, I had gathered the courage to talk to him. We sat down together and I took a deep breath before starting the conversation. "Michael," I began, "there's something I need to talk to you about. It's about last night." He looked at me with concern, sensing the seriousness in my tone. I told him everything. About the dance with Adam, the feelings it stirred within me, and my internal struggle. I was honest and open, sharing my emotions and the confusion I felt. Michael listened silently. His expression a mix of shock, hurt, and understanding. When I finished, he took a moment before responding. "I had no idea you were feeling this way," he said, his voice strained. "I appreciate your honesty. And I'm glad you told me it's important that we address these issues and work through them together." We spent the evening talking, exploring our feelings and discussing our relationship. It was a difficult and emotional conversation, but it was also necessary. We both acknowledged the need for open communication and a willingness to address any issues that arose. As the night came to a close, we found ourselves in a more understanding place. The conversation hadn't solved everything, but it had opened the door to deeper communication and a renewed commitment to each other lying in bed. I felt a sense of relief and hope the events of the previous night had tested my resolve. But they had also highlighted the importance of honesty and connection in my relationship with Michael. I knew that there was still work to be done, but I was ready to face it with a clearer perspective. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to navigate it with integrity and an open heart. And as I drifted off to sleep, I hoped that the lessons learned would lead to a stronger and more authentic connection with both Michael and myself.